I hired a housekeeper because the house was falling apart. I didn't realize I was the one who needed fixing. The coffee maker still ran at 6:15 every morning. I hadn't changed the timer, hadn't found a reason to. It brewed a full pot the way it always had, and I'd pour 1 cup and leave the rest sitting there until it burned cold. Every single day for 6 months. My name is Daniel, 47 years old, project manager, divorced. The house was mine after the settlement. 3 bedrooms. A backyard neither of us had used much anyway. On paper I came out fine. In practice I'd stopped opening the curtains in the living room sometime around February and hadn't noticed until April. I wasn't depressed. That's what I told myself. I was just adjusting. Then my sister Rachel showed up on a Saturday morning without calling first. She walked through every room without saying a word. Living room, kitchen, hallway. She paused at the bedroom door for exactly 3 seconds. Then she turned around and looked at me the way people look at something they've been worried about for a long time. "You're not living here, Daniel. You're haunting it." I didn't argue. I think some part of me had been waiting for someone to say it out loud. 2 days later, I posted a job listing. Simple. 4 days a week. References required. I wasn't looking for company. Just someone to make the place functional again. Most applications were forgettable. Then I opened one that wasn't. Clara Bennett, no lengthy introduction. Just 2 sentences. "I specialize in helping spaces feel like home again. I think yours needs me." Something about the certainty of it made me reply before I'd finished reading. She arrived the next morning at exactly 8 o'clock. Mid-50s. Calm eyes. The kind of stillness that doesn't come naturally. The kind you earn after surviving something you don't talk about. I noticed before anything else the thin silver wedding band hanging from a chain around her neck instead of her finger. She noticed me noticing. Neither of us said a word. She stepped inside and moved slowly through the living room, reading the space the way you read a room full of things people left behind. She stopped at the fireplace mantel. Among the clutter sat my wedding photo. Me and my ex-wife Catherine smiling on a day neither of us could have predicted the end of. Clara looked at it for a long moment, then just barely loud enough to exist, she whispered, "She never deserved you." I was standing 10 feet behind her. She had no idea. She turned around composed and professional and asked where I'd like her to start. I said the kitchen. She nodded and walked past me. And I stood there in my own living room asking myself one question I couldn't let go of for the rest of the day. She had been in my house for less than 4 minutes, so how did she already know? I told myself I wasn't curious about her. I told myself she was just the housekeeper. I was wrong on both counts. By the 3rd day, Clara had become part of the rhythm of the house. Not intrusively, not in a way that felt strange. Just quietly present the way a good housekeeper should be. There when I left for work, gone by the time I returned. The evidence of her visit left behind in small, careful ways. A folded dish towel, a cleared counter, the faint smell of something clean that I had forgotten houses could smell like. I started coming home differently, not dreading the driveway anymore, not sitting in the car for 10 minutes before going inside, just walking through the front door like a person who lived there. I noticed that. I also noticed I was thinking about her more than made sense, not in a complicated way, just the small questions that accumulate when someone enters your life and gives you almost nothing to work with. Where had she lived before? What the wedding band on the necklace meant? Who kept calling a number she never answered? That last one started on the 4th morning. I was in the kitchen pouring coffee before heading to work when her phone lit up on the counter. She had stepped outside to bring in the recycling bins. I wasn't trying to look. The screen just caught my eye the way bright things do. 12 missed calls, all from the same contact. No name saved, just a single initial. R. I looked away before she came back inside. She picked up the phone without glancing at the screen, set it face down on the counter, and began wiping the stovetop like nothing had happened. She already knew. She had felt those calls the way you feel something you've been dreading all morning. I left for work without saying anything, but I thought about it the entire drive. 12 calls from someone saved only as a single letter. A wedding band worn as a necklace. A woman who gave careful professional answers to every question, but somehow never actually answered anything. I came home that evening to find the house spotless and Clara gone, and her phone left behind on the kitchen counter. I saw it the moment I walked in, sitting right there next to the dish rack, face up this time. The screen lit up while I was standing there. 17 missed calls, same initial, same number. I stood very still for a moment. Then I did something I'm not proud of. Not because it was wrong exactly, but because of what it told me about how far my curiosity had already gone. I picked it up. The phone was locked. A 6-digit passcode I didn't know. But before I could set it back down, I heard the front door open behind me. Clara stepped inside. She saw the phone in my hand. Something moved across her face in less than a second. Not anger, not embarrassment. Something closer to fear that she immediately buried under a calm she had clearly practiced for a long time. "I think I left that behind," she said evenly. "You did," I said. It kept going off. She crossed the kitchen and took it from my hand gently, like someone retrieving something precious without wanting to make the moment bigger than it had to be. "Thank you," she said, and that was it. No explanation, no mention of the calls. She tucked the phone into her bag, picked up her coat, and said she'd see me Thursday. I watched her walk to her car. This time she didn't sit outside watching the house. She drove away immediately, faster than usual, and I stood in my kitchen understanding one thing very clearly. Whoever R was, Clara was not ignoring those calls because she didn't want to talk. She was ignoring them because she was afraid of what would happen if she did. I had almost convinced myself it was none of my business. Then my neighbor said 4 words that made it impossible to walk away. Thursday came and Clara arrived exactly on time the way she always did. I had decided overnight to let it go. The phone, the missed calls, the single initial saved where a name should have been. I had built it up in my head into something it probably wasn't. Clara was a private person. Private people existed. That wasn't a crime and it wasn't my concern. I was her employer, nothing more. So I said good morning. She said good morning back. I left for work and spent the day successfully not thinking about any of it. That part was a lie. I thought about it the entire day. By the time I pulled into my driveway that evening, I had landed on a simple decision. If something was genuinely wrong, Clara would ask for help when she was ready. Until then, I would be professional, courteous, uninvolved. I got out of the car. That was when my neighbor Pat called out from across the fence. Pat was 71 years old and had lived on this street longer than any house on it deserved. She knew everything about everyone, not because she was nosy, but because she had simply been paying attention since before most of us arrived. "Daniel," she said, "you got a minute?" I walked over. She glanced toward my front door first, then back at me. "That woman who's been coming to your house," she said quietly. "The housekeeper." "Clara," I said. "What about her?" Pat pressed her lips together the way people do when they're choosing words carefully. "I've seen her before," she said. "Not here. Somewhere else. I can't place it exactly, but I remember the face, and I remember thinking at the time that whatever situation that woman was in," she paused, "it wasn't a good one." I waited. "Where did you see her?" I asked. "That's the thing," Pat said. "I can't remember. Could have been the news. Could have been somewhere local. It was maybe 2 years back. But Daniel, I want you to be careful. Something about her felt off to me the moment I saw her walking up your path." I thanked her and went inside. I told myself Pat was 71 and memory at 71 played tricks. I told myself a half-remembered face from 2 years ago meant nothing. I told myself a lot of things while I heated up leftovers and sat at the kitchen table staring at nothing. Then I opened my laptop. Clara Bennett. I typed it into the search bar feeling slightly ridiculous. People searched for housekeepers all the time. This was just due diligence. Slightly delayed due diligence, but still. The results came back immediately. And there was nothing. Not nothing as in no results. Nothing as in no real person. A few social media profiles with the name, but none that matched her age or description. No professional history. No address records. No photographs that lined up. It was as if Clara Bennett had assembled herself from scratch sometime in the last few years and stepped into the world without a past attached. I closed the laptop, sat in the quiet of my clean kitchen in my clean house, and thought about the coffee maker that used to run for no one, and the curtains I hadn't opened for months, and the way coming home had started to feel like something other than punishment. Then I thought about 17 missed calls from someone saved only as a single letter, and I made a decision I wasn't sure was smart. I was going to ask her, not to pry, not to invade, just one direct question asked like one adult to another, because whatever Clara was running from, it was getting closer, and she was running toward it inside my house. I had one question ready, just one. I didn't expect her to answer it. I definitely didn't expect what came after. Clara arrived Friday morning the way she always did, exactly on time, neat appearance, calm eyes, the kind of composure that looks effortless until you understand how much work goes into maintaining it every single day. I had rehearsed the question 3 times in the shower, something simple, non-accusatory, just a door left open in case she wanted to walk through it. I waited until she had settled in, until the coffee was made and the morning felt ordinary enough that a conversation wouldn't feel like an ambush. She was wiping down the kitchen counter when I spoke. "Clara," she looked up. "Is everything okay with you?" She held my gaze for a moment, then returned to the counter. "Everything is fine," she said. "Thank you for asking." Clean answer, practiced answer, the kind of answer that closes a door before you finish knocking on it. I should have left it there. "I saw the calls," I said quietly. "Not on purpose, but I saw them, a lot of them, and I saw your face when you realized I had your phone." She stopped wiping, didn't turn around, just stopped. The silence in the kitchen was the kind that has weight to it, the kind you can feel pressing against the walls. "You don't have to tell me anything," I said. "I mean that, but if something is wrong and I can help, I'd rather know than not." Another long moment passed. Then Clara set down the cloth very carefully and turned around. She looked at me the way people look at someone when they're deciding whether or not to trust them. Really deciding. Not just considering it, but actually measuring the distance between where they are and where trust would require them to go. Whatever she found in my face must have been enough. Because she pulled out a chair and sat down, and she told me, not everything, not all at once, but enough. His name was Richard, her ex-husband. They had been married for 11 years, and for 9 of those years, Clara had been quietly disappearing inside the marriage the way people do when someone chips away at them slowly enough that they don't notice until there's very little left. He wasn't physically violent. She said that carefully, like she understood people expected that word and she wanted to be precise. But he controlled everything. Money, friends, where she went and when she returned and who she spoke to, and what she wore and how she answered the phone when his name appeared on the screen. She left 3 years ago. It had taken her 18 months to plan it. 18 months of careful, invisible preparation, while continuing to be exactly who he expected her to be so he wouldn't see it coming. She got out, changed her name slightly, moved twice, rebuilt slowly. But Richard had money, and Richard had patience, and Richard had never once in 11 years accepted that something he considered his could simply choose to leave. The calls were from his brother, the initial R, a man who presented himself to the outside world as a reasonable mediator, just trying to help 2 people find peace, a man who reported everything directly back to Richard. "He doesn't know where I am yet," Clara said. Her voice was steady, but her hands on the table were not. "But he's getting closer. He always gets closer eventually." I sat across from her in my clean, ordinary kitchen and said nothing for a moment. Then I asked the question that had been sitting at the back of everything since the very first morning. "The wedding photo," I said. "You whispered something. You didn't know I heard you." Something shifted in her expression. Not embarrassment. Something quieter than that. "I recognized it," she said simply. "The look on your face in that photo. The way you were smiling." She paused. "My wedding photos looked exactly the same. Happy on the surface, and somewhere behind the eyes something that didn't quite match." She looked down at her hands. "I'm sorry. That was an overstep." "No," I said, and I meant it. We sat in the quiet kitchen for another few minutes, not saying much. Just 2 people who had both lost versions of their lives they thought were permanent, sitting across from each other in the wreckage of something that used to be a home. Before she left that afternoon, she stopped at the door. "Daniel," she said, "what I told you today." "Stays here," I said. She nodded once and walked to her car without looking back. I stood at the window watching her drive away and thought about 11 years of disappearing slowly, about 18 months of invisible planning, about a woman who wore her wedding band around her neck instead of her finger because taking it off completely felt like a door she wasn't sure yet how to close. I thought about all of that, and then I thought about something else, something she hadn't mentioned, something I hadn't thought to ask, because it wasn't until I was getting ready for bed that night that a question occurred to me so obvious I couldn't believe it had taken me this long. Clara had told me about Richard. She had told me about his brother. She had told me about leaving and hiding and running and rebuilding, but in all of that she had never once mentioned whether she had done any of it alone. There are secrets people keep to protect themselves, and then there are secrets people keep to protect someone else. Clara's secret was the second kind, and it changed everything. I didn't ask her that weekend. I told myself I was giving her space, that she had shared enough on Friday and pressing further would undo whatever fragile trust had been built across that kitchen table. That was partly true. The other part was simpler. I wasn't sure I was ready for the answer, because something about the way Clara moved through the world had started to feel familiar to me in a way I couldn't quite name. The hyper-awareness, the way she always sat with her back to a wall, the way her eyes went to the window, first thing every morning before they went anywhere else. That wasn't just a woman who had left a bad marriage. That was a woman who was still inside it in every way that mattered. Monday morning she arrived and we fell back into the quiet routine that had become its own kind of language between us. Coffee, small conversation, the comfortable silence of two people who had stopped needing to fill every moment with words. I was almost out the door when I stopped. I don't know why that moment. Maybe it was the way she was standing at the kitchen window, looking out at the backyard with an expression I hadn't seen on her before. Not calm, not guarded, watchful, like someone listening for a sound they hoped wouldn't come. "Clara," I said, "can I ask you something?" She turned from the window. "When you left Richard," I said, "were you alone?" The question landed in the room and just stayed there. She looked at me for a long time, long enough that I almost took it back, almost told her to forget it, almost reached for the door handle and let the morning carry us both past the moment. Then she pulled out a chair and sat down, and I knew before she spoke that whatever came next was going to matter. "I have a daughter," she said. 2 seconds of silence. "Her name is Lily. She's 6 years old." I sat down slowly. "Richard doesn't know about her," Clara said. Her voice was quiet and precise, the way voices get when people have rehearsed something so many times it has worn smooth. "I found out I was pregnant 4 months after I left. I never told him. I've never told anyone connected to my old life." "Where is she now?" I asked. "With my sister, 2 towns over. I see her on weekends when I'm certain I haven't been followed." She paused. "I've been certain every time so far." So far. Those two words sat between us like something with edges. "She doesn't know why we live the way we live," Clara continued. "She's 6. I tell her we're on an adventure, that we move around because Mummy has a job that takes her to new places." A small, painful, almost smile crossed her face. "She believes me. Children that age still believe the stories you tell them." I thought about a 6-year-old girl, 2 towns over, being told her life was an adventure. I thought about what it costs a mother to hold that story together day after day. "Does your sister know the full situation?" I asked. "Enough of it," Clara said. "She knows to be careful. She knows not to talk about Lily to anyone asking questions about me." "And Richard's brother. The calls." Clara's jaw tightened slightly. "Robert has been getting closer," she said. "The last 2 cities I was in he showed up within 3 months. I don't know if he's tracking my phone or talking to people I've crossed paths with, or just methodical enough to narrow down the geography over time." She looked at her hands. "I've been here 4 months, which means I probably have another 4 to 6 weeks before I need to move again." 4 to 6 weeks. I looked around the kitchen she had brought back to life, at the dish towel folded the same careful way every single day, at the small plant she had placed on the windowsill 2 weeks ago without asking permission and that I had never once considered removing. "And Lily," I said, "when you move, she moves with you." "When I move," Clara said quietly. She loses another school, another set of friends, another place she just started to call home. She said it without drama, without self-pity, just the flat weight of a fact she had carried so long it had become part of her posture. I didn't say anything for a moment. Outside, a car passed slowly on the street. Clara's eyes went to the window before mine did. "I shouldn't have told you," she said. "The more people who know, the more ways there are for it to unravel." "I'm not going to say anything to anyone," I said. "I know," she said, and something in the way she said it told me she actually did know, that whatever she had been measuring since the first morning she walked through my door, I had somehow passed a test I hadn't known I was taking. She stood up and returned to the counter. I picked up my keys, got halfway to the door, and stopped one more time. "Clara," I said without turning around, "the wedding band around your neck." A pause. "It's not yours, is it?" Another pause. Longer. "No," she said softly. "It was my mother's. She passed 4 years ago. I wear it because—" She stopped, started again. "Because some days it's the only thing that reminds me that a good marriage is actually possible, that I didn't just imagine it could exist." I nodded at the door in front of me. Then I walked through it, and drove to work thinking about a woman who carried her mother's wedding ring around her neck as proof that love didn't have to feel like disappearing, and a 6-year-old girl 2 towns over who thought her whole life was an adventure, and 4 to 6 weeks, which suddenly felt like nothing at all. I had heard her story, I had seen her fear, but until that night I hadn't understood what it actually looked like, standing on a front porch asking polite questions with cold eyes. It happened on a Wednesday, Clara's day off. I had come home from work a little after 6 and was heating up dinner when the knock came. 3 clean, precise knocks. The kind that aren't asking for anything. The kind that already expect the door to open. I wasn't thinking about anything in particular when I answered it, and then I was. The man on my porch was somewhere in his mid-50s. Medium height, neat gray jacket, the kind of face that was designed to seem approachable, open features, an easy, almost smile that sat just slightly wrong, the way a picture hangs slightly crooked and you can feel it before you can measure it. "Sorry to bother you," he said. His voice was warm, practiced. "My name is Robert. I'm looking for someone, and I believe she may have been in this neighborhood recently." He held up his phone. A photograph of Clara, younger than she was now, hair a different length, but unmistakably her. I looked at the photo for exactly as long as a person would look at a photo of someone they didn't recognize. "Can't say I know her," I said. Robert nodded slowly, still smiling, still easy. "She's my sister-in-law," he said. "Family situation. Nothing dramatic. We've just lost touch and her brother is worried. You know how it is." I said I did. "She may be going by a different name," he said, almost gently, like he was sharing a confidence. "She does that sometimes, goes through periods where she pulls away from everyone who cares about her. We just want to make sure she's safe." He said it so well. The concern in his voice was exactly calibrated, not overdone, not desperate, just the right amount of worried brother-in-law looking for a woman who sometimes lost herself. If I hadn't been sitting across a kitchen table from Clara 4 days ago, I might have believed every word of it. "I haven't seen her," I said, "but if I do, I'll let her know her family is looking for her." Something moved behind Robert's eyes. Not much, just a small recalibration. A fractional adjustment of a man who was very good at reading people and had just read something in me he was deciding what to do with. "I'd appreciate that," he said. He reached into his jacket pocket and produced a card, plain white, just a name and a phone number, no company, no title. "Any time of day," he said, "whenever is convenient." I took the card, thanked him, closed the door, and stood very still in my hallway listening to his footsteps move off the porch. I went to the front window and watched from the side of the curtain the way Clara had taught me without ever meaning to. He walked to a dark blue sedan parked 2 houses down, not directly outside my door. 2 houses down. The choice of someone who understood the optics of where you leave your car. He sat inside for 4 minutes without starting the engine, just sitting. I know because I counted. Then he drove away slowly, and I stood there holding a plain white card with a name and number on it, and understanding something about Clara's life that I hadn't fully understood before. She wasn't being dramatic. She wasn't exaggerating the threat or catastrophizing the situation the way people sometimes do when fear has lived with them long enough to distort their sense of scale. This was real. Robert was real. The patience of him was real. The way he had stood on my porch and constructed an entire fiction in real time with the ease of someone who had done it many times before in many doorways in front of many people. I called Clara. She picked up on the second ring, which told me she had been waiting for something. "He was here," I said. A silence on the other end that had a specific texture to it. Not surprise, something worse than surprise. The particular silence of a fear that has finally been confirmed after weeks of almost. "What did he say?" she asked. I told her. All of it. The sister-in-law story, the concerned family narrative, the way he had shown her photograph like someone sharing something sad and ordinary. Clara was quiet for a long moment. "He believed you," she said finally. Not a question. "I don't think so," I said honestly. "I think he wasn't sure, which might be worse." Another silence. "Clara," I said, "you need to think about what comes next. If he tracked you to this neighborhood, he'll be back. Men like Robert don't make one trip." "I know," she said. Her voice had changed. The careful, composed steadiness she maintained like a second skin had thinned just slightly at the edges. Just enough to hear what was underneath it. Not panic. Something quieter than panic. The exhaustion of a woman who had been running for 3 years and could feel the distance between herself and what she was running from getting smaller again. "Lily," she said quietly, almost to herself, just the one word, but it carried everything inside it. Every calculation she had been making since the moment she became a mother, running from a man who didn't know his daughter existed. Every school Lily had left. Every adventure that wasn't an adventure. "Get some rest tonight," I said, because it was the only true thing I could offer her in that moment. "We'll figure out what to do." I don't know why I said we. It came out before I thought about it, and Clara didn't correct me, which told me something I hadn't expected to learn about either of us that evening. I hung up and stood in the kitchen holding my phone and looking at the plain white card on the counter. A name and a number. No title, no company. Because men like Robert didn't need a title. They just needed to know where you were, and now he was one door away from knowing exactly that. There are moments in a life where you can see exactly two roads in front of you. One is safe, one is right. And for the first time in a long time, I understood the difference. I didn't sleep that night. Not really. I lay in the dark staring at the ceiling the way I used to in the months after the divorce when the silence had teeth and every hour felt like something to survive rather than something to rest inside. But this was different. This wasn't the hollow sleeplessness of a man grieving a marriage that had quietly died. This was something sharper, more awake, the kind of wakefulness that comes when your mind is working on something it hasn't finished yet and refuses to power down until it gets there. I kept seeing Robert's face, the ease of him, the practiced warmth, the way he had stood on my porch and assembled a story from nothing, with the confidence of a man who had never once been called on it. And I kept thinking about Clara, about 11 years of disappearing slowly, about 18 months of invisible planning, about a 6-year-old girl 2 towns over being told her whole life was an adventure, while her mother ran calculations in the background that no child should ever have to understand. By 3 in the morning I had stopped pretending I was going to sleep. I got up, made coffee, sat at the kitchen table in the dark with my hands around the mug, and thought about the 2 roads. The first road was sensible. Tell Clara I was sorry, that what was happening to her was genuinely terrible, that I hoped she found a way through it. Write her a generous severance check and wish her well and go back to being a man who lived alone in a quiet house and opened the curtains again and did not get involved in situations that had nothing to do with him. That road existed. It was available to me. I looked at it clearly and honestly, and without pretending it wasn't there. The second road was harder to define, not because it was complicated, but because it required something I hadn't been asked to give in a long time. Not money, not time, Not even courage exactly, just a decision to stop treating my own comfort as the most important variable in the equation. I thought about what Clara had said about her mother's wedding ring, about wearing it as proof that a good marriage was possible, that love didn't have to feel like disappearing. I thought about Lily, 6 years old, being told she was on an adventure, losing schools and friends and places she had just started to call home because the alternative was a man finding out she existed. I sat at that table until the sky outside the kitchen window went from black to gray to the pale thin blue of early morning. Then I picked up my phone. Clara answered on the first ring. She hadn't slept either. "I need you to come over," I said. "This morning, early. Bring whatever you need to bring." A pause. "Daniel, I have a spare room," I said. "You've seen it. It's just sitting there. And my house is the last place Robert is going to look because he already looked here, and I told him I didn't know you." Silence on the other end. "That's not a small thing I'm asking you to walk into," she said carefully. "I know. If Richard finds out you helped me, the situation stops being just mine." "I know that too." Another pause. Longer this time. "Why?" she asked, and the way she asked it told me she genuinely didn't know. That 3 years of running had recalibrated her sense of what people were willing to do for each other to the point where a simple act of help had become something she needed explained. I thought about how to answer that honestly. "Because you walked into my house 4 weeks ago and whispered something under your breath that you didn't know I heard," I said. "And it was the first true thing anyone had said to me in 6 months. And I think you've been carrying something that's too heavy to carry alone, and I have a house with more rooms than I need, and a guest room that's been empty since before my marriage ended." I stopped. Then I said the last part. "And because Lily shouldn't have to start over again, not if there's another option." The silence this time was different from all the other silences. Softer. Something in it that hadn't been in any of the ones before. "There's something else," Clara said quietly. "Something I haven't told you yet. Something I found out 2 days ago that changes the timeline." My chest tightened slightly. "What is it?" I asked. "Not on the phone," she said. "I'll come over. I'll put the coffee on." She arrived 40 minutes later. She had a bag with her. Not a large one. The bag of someone who had learned to pack only what they could carry quickly. She sat across from me at the kitchen table, the same seats we always took, the ones that had somehow become ours over 4 weeks of small mornings and careful conversations. She wrapped her hands around the coffee mug, took a breath, and told me the thing that made everything more urgent than I had understood. I listened without interrupting. And by the time she finished speaking, I understood that the decision I had made at 3 a.m, sitting alone in the dark, was no longer just the right thing to do. It was the only thing to do. And we were already running out of time. There are things you prepare yourself to hear, and then there are things that land on the kitchen table between 2 cups of coffee and change the temperature of the entire room. She set her phone down between us. Face up, a screenshot on the screen, a conversation between 2 people. Names I didn't recognize at the top, but the words underneath them were clear enough. I read it once, then read it again. Clara watched me read it the second time the way people watch someone open something they already know the contents of, not waiting for surprise, just waiting for the moment understanding arrives. I set the phone down. "Where did you get this?" I asked. "A woman I used to work with," Clara said. "Before I left Richard. She stayed in touch with some of his circle without him knowing. She sends me things sometimes when she thinks I need to know." The screenshot was a message exchange between Robert and Richard. Not detailed, not explicit. Robert wasn't careless enough for that, but clear enough between the lines for someone who knew how to read what men like that weren't quite saying. Robert had narrowed the search to 3 neighborhoods. Mine was one of them. He had a contact, someone local, a person described only as a reliable set of eyes who had been asked to watch for a woman matching Clara's description in the area. And at the bottom of the exchange, sent 2 days ago, 4 words from Richard that made everything else irrelevant. "Find her before Sunday." I looked up from the phone. Sunday, I said. 4 days from now, Clara said. I don't know what Sunday means specifically, whether he's coming himself or whether it's just a deadline he gave Robert, but Richard sets deadlines the way other people set traps. There's always a reason for the date even when he doesn't explain it. Do you have any idea what the reason might be? Clara wrapped both hands around her mug. Lily turns 7 on Sunday, she said quietly. The kitchen went very still. I thought about what that meant, about a man who had spent 3 years looking for a woman who had left him, about the specific calculation of a controlling man, discovering not just that his wife had run, but that she had run while carrying his child, about what Sunday represented to someone like Richard. Not a birthday, a deadline. He found out about Lily, I said. It wasn't a question, but Claire answered it anyway. I don't know how, she said. I have been so careful. My sister has been so careful. But Robert sent that message 2 days ago, and the timing is not a coincidence, and Richard does not chase things he does not intend to find. She said the last part, the way you say something you learned the hard way over 11 years. I sat back in my chair, thought about Robert on my porch 4 days ago. The practiced warmth, the calibrated concern, the way he had stood there with Clara's photograph and constructed his fiction with the ease of someone who already knew more than he was showing. He had already been watching the neighborhood before he knocked on my door. The knock hadn't been a search. It had been a confirmation. The reliable set of eyes, I said. Someone local. Do you have any idea who? Clara shook her head slowly. It could be anyone, she said. Richard is patient and Richard has money, and money makes people surprisingly willing to watch a street and report back what they see. I thought about that, thought about the street outside, the neighbors I waved to in the morning, the people whose names I half knew and whose routines I had absorbed over years without ever really thinking about them. Then I thought about something else. Something that had been sitting at the edge of my mind since the night Robert knocked on my door, and I had watched him from behind the curtain the way Clara had taught me without meaning to. He had parked 2 houses down, not directly outside, 2 houses down, which was directly outside the home of a retired man named Gerald, who had moved in 18 months ago and whom I had exchanged maybe 4 conversations with total, and who I realized now I knew almost nothing about. I didn't say that out loud. Not yet, because I could be wrong, and being wrong about a neighbor in a situation like this was not a small mistake. Clara, I said, Sunday is 4 days away, which means we have 4 days to make a decision and do something with it, rather than just sit with it. I know. Lily needs to be moved, not after Sunday, before it. Clara's jaw tightened slightly. I know that too. And you need to stop being somewhere predictable. Robert knows this neighborhood. He may not know this house yet, but he knows the area, and that gap is going to close. Daniel, I'm not saying this to frighten you. I know why you're saying it, she said quietly. I've been saying the same things to myself since I got that screenshot. I just needed to sit across from another person and hear it out loud to make it real. She looked at me steadily. I've been running alone for 3 years. I've gotten very good at it. But I've also learned that there's a specific kind of mistake you make when you've been alone with a problem long enough. You start to think the only options are the ones you can see from where you're standing. She paused. So I'm asking, she said. Not for rescue, not for someone to fix it, just for another set of eyes on the options. I nodded. Then here's what I see, I said, and I laid it out, carefully, methodically, the way I approached every problem at work that had a hard deadline and too many moving parts and consequences that mattered. I talked for several minutes. Clara listened without interrupting. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Then she said something I hadn't expected. There's one more thing, she said. One more piece I haven't told you because I wasn't sure it was relevant. I'm still not sure, but given everything. She stopped, started again. Before I left Richard, she said carefully, I took something. Not money, not jewelry. Something that belongs to me by every right I understand, but that Richard would not see it that way. Something I took because I knew one day I might need it. She looked at me directly. and I think that might be the real reason he set Sunday as the deadline. I held her gaze. What did you take? I asked. Clara reached into the bag she had brought with her and placed something on the kitchen table between us. I looked at it for a long moment and understood immediately why Richard had spent 3 years looking, and why Sunday was not just a deadline, it was a reckoning. I have spent a long time believing that the truth eventually surfaces on its own, that patience is enough, that if you wait long enough, justice finds its way. Clara showed me something on that kitchen table that taught me patience was a luxury neither of us had anymore. It was a small brown envelope, worn at the corners, the kind of worn that comes from being handled carefully many times over many months, moved from hiding place to hiding place, checked and rechecked in the dark of whatever room she happened to be sleeping in at the time. Clara placed it on the table between us and did not open it immediately. She looked at it the way you look at something that has cost you more than you originally agreed to pay. Before I left Richard, she said quietly, I spent 18 months preparing. You know that part. What I didn't tell you is that 6 of those 18 months were spent on this. She tapped the envelope once. Richard built his business over 20 years. Import and export. Legitimate on the surface. The kind of operation that files clean paperwork and attends the right dinners and donates to the right causes. She paused. And underneath that, a second set of books, a second stream of money, moving through accounts in 3 different countries in ways that the first set of books would never be able to explain. I looked at the envelope. You took the second set of books, I said. I took copies, she said. Documents, account records, transfer logs, going back 11 years, everything I could photograph or print or quietly remove without him noticing. She finally picked up the envelope and opened it, slid the contents onto the table, a thick folded set of papers, photographed documents, printed records with account numbers and dates and figures that even at a glance told a story a prosecutor would find very interesting. I took them because I knew that one day I might need something that made me more dangerous to him than he was to me. I looked at the papers without touching them. Does he know you have them? He suspects, Clara said. He noticed certain things were missing about 2 months after I left. He couldn't prove I had taken them, couldn't prove anything had existed in the first place without exposing himself, so he couldn't go to the police, couldn't make any kind of official report. A thin, precise smile crossed her face, not warm, the smile of someone who had planned something carefully and watched it work exactly as intended. The only thing he could do was find me, get them back quietly, make sure I never had the chance to use them. I sat back, the full shape of it settling into place now. 3 years of searching. Robert and his calibrated concern and his plain white card. The reliable set of eyes watching the neighborhood. The Sunday deadline. It wasn't just about control. It wasn't just about a man who couldn't accept that something he considered his had chosen to leave. It was about self-preservation. Those documents on my kitchen table were the difference between Richard's life continuing exactly as it was, and Richard spending the better part of the next decade in a federal courtroom. If you give these to the right people, I said slowly. It ends, Clara said simply. Not immediately, not without difficulty, but it ends. He goes from hunter to hunted. The money disappears. The power disappears. The reason to find me disappears because finding me stops being a solution and starts being an additional problem. Then why haven't you used them already? She was quiet for a moment. Because using them means surfacing, she said. It means going to authorities and giving them my real name and my real location and trusting that the process works faster than Richard's response to it. It means Lily's name potentially entering records. It means my sister being questioned. It means standing still long enough to be found while I wait for a system that moves slowly to catch up with a man who moves quickly. She looked down at the papers. Every time I got close to doing it, something made me pull back. Fear, timing, a new city, starting over. Telling myself next month, next month, next month. Until Sunday, I said. Until Sunday, she said. She began gathering the papers back into the envelope carefully, the same careful handling. The same practiced quiet of someone who had done this many times in many rooms. "There's a lawyer," she said. "I've had his name for 2 years, a federal attorney in Charlotte who specializes in exactly this kind of financial case. I've written the email to him 4 times and deleted it 4 times. She set the envelope down. "I think it's time to write it a 5th time and not delete it." "Do it today," I said. She looked at me. "Today," I said again, not urgently, just clearly. "Not tomorrow, not after you've thought about it more. Today, because Sunday is 4 days away, and Robert is one conversation with the right neighbor from knowing which house you're in, and Lily is turning 7 and she deserves to turn 8 somewhere she doesn't have to leave." Something moved across Clara's face. Not the practiced composure, not the careful steadiness she wore like a second skin. Something underneath all of that. Something that had been waiting a long time for someone to say what I had just said with enough certainty that it felt like solid ground, rather than just another plan that might not hold. Her eyes went bright for just a moment. She looked away towards the window, collected herself the way she always collected herself, quietly and quickly, and without asking anyone to wait for her. "There's one problem," she said. "What?" "Robert is watching this neighborhood, possibly with help. If I reach out to the lawyer from here and Richard's people have any way of monitoring my communications." "Use my laptop," I said. "New email account. Nothing connected to you." She thought about that, nodded slowly. I got up and retrieved the laptop from the counter, set it on the table between us. She opened it and sat for a moment with her hands resting on the keyboard, not quite typing yet. The way you sit before you do something that you know is going to change the direction of everything. Then she started typing. I refilled both our coffees and sat back down and did not read what she was writing, because it wasn't mine to read. Outside, the morning had gone from pale blue to full daylight. The street was quiet. A car passed. A dog barked somewhere 2 blocks over and then stopped. Ordinary sounds. The sounds of a neighborhood that did not know what was sitting at a kitchen table inside one of its houses. Clara finished typing. She read it back once. Then she looked at me. "If I send this," she said, "everything changes." "Everything already changed," I said. "The moment Robert knocked on that door, it changed. The question now is just whether it changes on his timeline or yours." She held my gaze for a long, steady moment. Then she looked back at the screen and pressed send. The sound the laptop made was small and ordinary. Just the soft click of a trackpad in a quiet kitchen. But in the silence that followed, it felt like something much larger than that, like a door closing on 3 years of running, and another one opening onto something neither of us could fully see yet. Clara exhaled slowly, set her hands flat on the table, and for the first time since she had walked through my front door 6 weeks ago, the watchfulness left her eyes. Not completely, not permanently, but enough, just enough to see the person underneath it. And I understood, sitting across from her in my kitchen in the full morning light, that whatever came next was going to be difficult and uncertain and tangled in ways neither of us could predict, but we were facing it, and that was different from running. That was different from everything. I looked at the small brown envelope on the table between us. 3 years of careful survival folded into a set of documents that were about to become someone else's problem to unravel. And Sunday still 4 days away. And one question I still hadn't answered. The man named Gerald, 2 houses down, and a dark blue sedan that had parked directly outside his home. I had stayed quiet about it all morning, but I wasn't going to be able to stay quiet about it much longer.
Winter arrived quietly that year. The peach tree we'd planted in the backyard had lost all its leaves, and according to Lorraine, it looked about as lively as an old broomstick. I told her it was just waiting for spring. She said the same thing about people. A few weeks before Christmas, we finally had the conversation we'd both been avoiding. Not because we were afraid, because neither of us wanted to ruin something that had become precious. We were sitting on the porch with blankets around our shoulders when Lorraine suddenly laughed. "Imagine explaining this to people," I smiled. "I've stopped trying." She nodded. "So have I." Then, after a long silence, she asked the question that mattered. "Garrett, if I had somewhere else to go, would you want me to?" I didn't answer immediately. Not because I didn't know, because I did. I'd known for months. I reached over and took her hand. "No." Her eyes filled with tears. Not dramatic tears, not movie tears. Just the quiet kind that appear when someone hears something they were afraid to hope for. "I don't want you to stay because you need a place to live," I told her. "I want you to stay because somewhere along the way, this stopped feeling like my home and started feeling like ours." Lorraine smiled through her tears. That's a dangerous thing to say to a woman who makes peach preserves. I laughed. And yet, I stand by it. She squeezed my hand, and neither of us needed to say anything more, because sometimes happiness doesn't arrive like fireworks. Sometimes it arrives quietly, like someone asking how your day was, like 2 cups of coffee waiting in the morning, like laughter in a kitchen that used to be silent. By spring, the peach tree had started to bloom. So had other things. Danielle visited more often, not because everything had been magically repaired, but because people grow, and because forgiveness, like trust, takes time. One Sunday afternoon, she stood beside her mother in the backyard and shook her head with a smile. "You know," she said, "if somebody had told me 5 years ago that my mother and my ex-husband would end up planting fruit trees together, I would have called them crazy." Lorraine laughed. "So would I." "And now?" Danielle smiled. "Now I think it's kind of beautiful." Last week I turned 41, and that morning I woke up to the smell of fresh biscuits and peach preserves. Lorraine was humming softly in the kitchen. The radio was playing one of her old songs, and sunlight was pouring through the windows. Nothing extraordinary, nothing dramatic, just peace. Which, I've learned, is sometimes the greatest gift life can offer. And every now and then, when I look at that peach tree in the backyard, I think back to the rainy Thursday night when someone knocked on my door. At the time, I thought I was helping a lonely woman who needed a place to stay. Funny how life works. Because it turns out, she rescued me too.